Welcome to Keep Hustling, where we are going past the why to get to the how. I'm your host, the always hustling Aaron Gordon, aka NY Risk Advisor, aka Mr. Keep Hustling. In this podcast, we will be diving deep into the professional and personal successes of our guests to find out how they hustled through the most difficult times in their life and their development to achieve the success they've gotten to today. So buckle up for what hopes to be an amazing ride. Let's get to it. Welcome to Keep Hustling with my guest, my good friend, my ride or die, the one and only Zach Weiner. Zach, thank you for being here.
Honored to be here. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Let's get this out of the way first. Yes, I do have a close friend who's from Boston. We're just going to get that out of the way early on. We did have a guest from Philly. It got a little heated regarding some sports stuff, but we are friends. And even though you're from Boston, you didn't know I was going to go here, but recently I was looking at my wedding album, which is scary that it was almost 14 years ago. And my kids, all five of them were, well, the little one probably wasn't asking this question, but a bunch of them were like, who's the weirdo wearing the green? And I'm like, that's the guy who loves the Boston Celtics and felt that this would be an appropriate moment to rub that in my face. So whatever, that's it. Zach Weiner, thank you for being here.
One thing about your wedding was I was still fairly new to New York City. And so I didn't really understand how to get from where I was in Washington Heights to the airport to fly to LA for your wedding. And so with a friend, we woke up extremely early and took like a 2.5 hour A train through Manhattan, down Brooklyn, up to JFK and onto the train. And I've learned my lesson.
I don't want to
throw
this person under the bus. I'm pretty certain I know who you're talking about. And that's really embarrassing. So
yeah, he still hasn't forgiven me.
Wait, was your idea?
Yeah, I had no idea. Like, I was so new to New York City that, now it's on the back of my hand. But at the time, I'm like, I had no idea there was a train that went from Penn Station. I'm just like, oh, let's get on the subway and go.
One of our greatest sources of pride is turning you into a New Yorker. And
exactly.
Your son's birth certificate says, where was he born? I'm just being curious.
Yeah, Lenox Hospital.
Doesn't it say New York,
New York.
NY?
Yeah.
Just making sure.
My license is officially New York now. I had to give up to Massachusetts.
That's it. We can end the podcast right here.
There you go.
Okay, let's jump right in. Zach, other than being from Boston, I know your story. I know about your career. I know all the crazy, awesome things you've done. Take us back to the upbringing of Zach Weiner and what we need to know that kind of catapulted you to where you are today professionally.
Yeah, I mean, simply, I grew up in a modern Orthodox home, Sharon, Massachusetts, and it was a home of medicine. Both my parents were doctors. My older sister became a doctor. My brother became a dentist. After me, my younger sister became a doctor. And it's just medicine and science was never my calling. I always loved relationships, building relationships, whether it's with customers or clients, partners, and all that within kind of a lead generation marketing type space. And that's just from a very young age. I always wanted to go into the business world. I always wanted to go into some type of marketing or marketing consulting. And I'm very thankful that the classic Jewish joke is, your parents want you to become a doctor, but actually my parents were beyond supportive. And we used to have a running joke that I was the first one in my family to get a job. So,
or the only one that didn't hate themselves enough to go to all that extra school.
Right, exactly. So I was never a big school person, and I was eager to graduate college. How much I regret that now, but as an adult. But I was eager to graduate and get into the working world. I was always motivated to support myself and just like live an adult life. And that's what kind of brought me into this space. And then just my career has been over 12 years of event marketing, marketing in the finance and accounting and banking space, in the food industry. And now I'm in the technology and software and generative AI area.
Of course you are generative.
There's an arms race.
I wasn't going to go here, but I have to ask. So when you think you have strep or an ear infection, who do you call for a script?
Great question. It's changed
it's not
over
your mom,
the years.
For sure. It's not your mom. The question is,
no.
And don't say you don't do that. Everybody does that. Okay, cancel me, Spotify and Apple, because I said that's. But is it like you call your older sister or you call your younger sister situation? Like, how awkward is that?
It used to be the older sister. It's now become the younger sister. She lives in New York City, right near me. We were very close because of that. And it's not even you're asking about me, but actually both my sisters are pediatricians, and so
I
anytime there's
forgot that.
anything with the baby,
Oh my God,
they're
that's
getting phone calls
horrible.
from us.
That
Yeah,
is horrible.
yeah.
I can't imagine being, oh no.
First time parent, just the kid coughs once
The,
and they're
the, the
getting phone
best part,
calls.
the best part, and I love that we're going here because this really does plan to keep hustling, is like the first time you call her and you're like, there's something wrong, or like there has to be something wrong. And she's like, no, this is normal or this is okay. And you're making it into a big deal. And she's like, I'm a doctor. And you're like, but I'm your older brother.
Right. But I
But
will
I went
say
to
I'm
but I
very
went to school
thankful to
for this,
both of
Zach.
them.
So,
Yeah.
whatever.
I'm very thankful to both of them that they're both on the very chill side. So it's usually like everything's okay. Sometimes speak to your doctor, but most of the time it's everything's okay. Everything's totally normal, you know. So,
Not to scare you, not to scare you. And thankfully, as you know, I have 5 beautiful, healthy children. But
yes.
our pediatrician where we live is very similar to that. And it was kind of disconcerting to my wife at the beginning. Was like, oh, this guy doesn't get worked up about anything. The flip side of that is if and when they ever are like, you need to get to a specialist now, or you need
Right.
to get to a hospital now, you're like, oh, wait, they're not joking.
Right.
Like, it's not like, oh, they always get riled up.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is serious. But
Yeah.
but I want to ask you about that. Like, it's interesting that you say you always knew that you wanted to be in business. I know your family a little bit, and I know that they're very big persons, whatever that, you know what I mean? Persons,
Yeah.
people, whatever. So it's interesting. It's not like they're like super clinicians, like pediatricians are historically people
Yeah.
in the physician world. It's not like they're, not to knock on orthopedic surgeons, but like orthopedic surgeons have that, reputation of, being just stiff carpenters, for lack of a better term.
Right.
And it's like, so what did you not see there other than the school part that was
Yeah.
like, and by the way, I want to ask you a second part of that question. What do you think your siblings saw to want to go into medicine?
Good question. So I'll start by saying that you mentioned like a carpenter, but that like in the modern Orthodox world in the 90s and the early thousands, there was really like 3 buckets, right? It was medicine, it was law, and it was business, right? So business has so many things under it, right? There it could be finance, accounting, marketing, right?
I was about to say,
But
and business was mostly finance and accounting.
right. But growing up, before you know that, it's medicine, it's law, and it's business. So law was never going to happen, and I'm not afraid to admit that I really struggled with science courses, and not for lack of effort, but really really struggled, and it was pretty clear from an early age that that wasn't going to be my future, and so it was going to be business, right? But and then I had to find my calling within business. So I went to business school at YU and took different courses, and the marketing courses spoke to me by far the most, by a country mile, and I just loved
It wasn't macroeconomics that spoke to you?
no, not exactly. But I remember taking a brand class where we did a deep dive into magazine ads and commercials. What's the message? Who's the target audience? What's the value proposition? And I just loved digging real deep into these ads, and it was fun. It was great. And little did I know at the time that was B2C marketing, and I was going to be entering B2B marketing, which is a way different world. But it interested me really from day one when I got to university. For my siblings, my older sister, I just remember ER was like a super popular TV show, and she was from a young age, and we used to have
What is your older sister's name?
Chana.
Okay, so Chana, I want to say this to you with absolute certainty, and I hope that you're listening to this. I'm apologizing on Zach's behalf for him saying that you chose this career.
She will tell you though.
ER.
She will tell you that for years she would record the shows and watch them with my dad, and they would like talk through the medical aspect of the show. She'll tell you that.
Was like total side point. What did your dad say? By the way, the great Mark Weiner, he should rest in peace.
Thank you. Amen.
What did he? This is a totally side point. I've not doing the podcast. What did he used to say about the medicine? Because I imagine some of it is terrible.
Oh, in the TV show? Yeah. So basically, I would hear him saying like, well, that's a little exaggerated, but what's really happening is X, Y, Z,
And you're like, I wonder how much money they're making off this.
Right, exactly. So, And I can't answer the question for my brother because my brother, when I found out he was applying to dental school, it was like the biggest shock. I had no idea that it was even an interest of his.
You're like, dude, we're supposed to be in this together, and now you're
Yeah,
ditching me.
exactly. So, but again, it was just a very medical family. And, my dad, just, you brought him up. My dad was really, really good at coming down to your level when discussing things. You know, he would, he had a friend whose mother was in the hospital, and that friend was like your classic, like real stereotypical Bostonian. And my dad was able to explain to him what was going on through like Boston sports analogies. That's just what he was very good at, and that he made it enjoyable. And that when you make something enjoyable, it generates interest.
I wasn't going to go here, but I do want to go here. I want to talk about your dad for a little bit.
Sure. I mean, he
Bec-
is the definition of keep hustling.
so I do want to get to
Yeah,
that. I totally, as you're saying this, I'm thinking, if it's okay with you, I'd
of
like to
course.
ask you to tell the story of not only his compassion, but his specialty. What happened on the bike ride? I think it was a bike ride, if I'm correct, or the car ride.
Car ride, yeah.
The car ride, and what happened after that will inspire the keep hustling movement.
You got it. So, my father, Dr. Mark Weiner, was a neurologist, and he was a brilliant neurologist. And I'll first just say that many of his patients were like construction workers or just like your everyday blue collar. And he was so good at just going in and, like I said, talking sports. You see the game last night, and his patients loved him. And one day back in 2012, early 2012, he was driving his car and he felt pain in his left knee. And somehow, I still to this day can't tell you how. It's just that's why I say he was brilliant. He somehow knew that it wasn't a knee problem, it was a brainwave to the knee problem. And he drove to an MRI and they discovered a brain tumor. They gave him pretty much 3 to 6 months to live. It was a glioblastoma, which is one of the worst tumors you can have. He had surgery pretty soon after the diagnosis. Went into 6 weeks of radiation, a year of chemo, and was still going. So the
Still riding
doc
his bike, right? Wasn't he
and
riding his
and so
bike
my
at
dad
some
was a
point?
huge bike rider. My parents used to do these wild bike rides from Boston to New York City, Boston to Toronto. When he was younger, his big dream was to bike from Boston to New York City. And he and my mom, they mapped out all of the hotels along the way and all of the Walmarts along the way, and they biked with nothing. And then they would go to the Walmart, buy new clothing, and throw the old clothing out and just keep going. And so for their 25th anniversary, they did this trip to New York City, and it was a big deal. So then after his surgery, his big goal was to get back on the bike. It was his greatest passion, his greatest love was biking. And so he got back on the bike and he biked for half a mile. Then he got back on the bike again, biked for a mile, and then he, 5 miles, 10 miles. And then he said, I have this dream of doing the Boston to New York City bike ride again. They raised money for brain cancer research and they did it. It took longer, obviously, than the previous times, but it was really one of the most inspiring things. They had a whole crew with them. There were people driving a van, carrying his walker. And that was also an amazing thing is that what a lot of us don't realize is different parts of your brain control different aspects of your body. So when he was walking, he needed a walker. But then when he got on his bike, it was different part of the brain. He was fine. So it was really amazing to watch.
I want to dissect a lot there, but
Yeah.
that last point is so keep hustling to me because it's
Yes.
like I can't walk or I'm struggling walking. I have this theory, let's say, that biking would be great. Now, most people be like, I can't walk.
Right.
I have this terminal diagnosis. My couch is actually my recliner in my, wallowing in my own sadness is actually where I should be. And I remember when it happened. I remember the phone calls. I remember the whole thing, actually, the whole process. And I remember you telling me that he used to bike to synagogue.
Yes.
There was a period of
Yes.
time, and
He
this
got a
was
heads up from the
later, right?
rabbi.
But how long this had to be well after 2012, right?
Oh yeah. So right. So to finish the story, he was given 3 to 6 months to live, and he took it 6.5 years. Passed away at end of December, right before Christmas of 2018. And it's really just an incredible story. When I would meet other doctors or neurologists, and I tell them he has a glioblastoma and he's had it for 5.5 years, they'd be like, "I beg your pardon." You say 5.5 months? I'm like, "No, 5.5 years." I think part of it is, very blessed. I think part of it is he was in amazing shape at the time of his diagnosis, and I think part of it is the hustling factor, right? He would go to the gym. So, after in his brain surgery, they nicked a small piece of his brain, and so he had trouble on his left side. So he used to go to the gym, and he'd go on a stationary bike at the gym, and then he'd go to the pool and put weights on his left side and just walk the pool. So he was always hustling. It was a great joy for him to be in the gym. Once his body got to a point where, he couldn't even get into a car and the gym wasn't going to be, and he was kind of, confined to his house, we kind of set up some things, including a stationary bike in the house for him to work on, because it was such a passion and a love for him to get on his bike, even for 5 minutes made him happy through the hell he was going through at the end. So really, just an amazing man. I miss him every single day. I wish he got to meet my wife. I wish he got to meet my son.
He did.
And he did, of course. He's a major part of our relationship, and I've definitely, I got a lot my 30 plus years with him, so that I take with me every day.
Just for the record, not before we will get back on this topic. If you ever decide that you want to do a bike ride from New York to Boston, or Boston to New York, it will be my greatest pleasure to be the guy in the van.
A lot of work and a lot of hustling needs to be done.
But I will gladly be the guy in the van.
You got it. I appreciate it.
I'll be the guy in the van, and when you need a water, I'm willing to stick my arm out.
I think there's a better chance of you biking Boston to New York, and I'm the one in the van at this point in time.
It wouldn't be Boston or whatever. But the thing about his hustle, I think, honestly, I know that this show is a lot about career, and we were talking about early life and him being a physician. And by the way, not to discount the incredible amount of support and hustle that your mother showed during that time. And I think that growing up in a house like that, where this is going to sound wrong, because obviously you said there's a lot of luck and being blessed and there's certain medical things, but like getting a diagnosis like that and say, I think I remember speaking to you early on in that, and he was like, this is not going to be the end. Like this is it. This is not it.
Moving forward.
And some people wouldn't say that. Some people would say that and not believe it. Like that, the hustle and that which I think is ingrained in you and your siblings from your upbringing.
Absolutely.
Is like, no, this is how it's going to be. We're going to fight this thing till the very end. And by the way, if we're getting to the keep hustling, the definition of keep hustling, that's how you prove everyone else wrong. And that's how you get ahead.
I think there's positive acceptance, right? So like this is how it is, and it is what it is. And that's what it is.
But I'm getting on the bike.
But we're gonna fight it. We're gonna work it. He wrote an amazing essay that got published, basically talking about how he went from being the doctor to being the patient.
I remember. It's great.
And
is it online?
I will find it.
So let's see if you can. We'll link it in the show notes.
You got it.
I think people would love to read that.
Fantastic.
That's amazing. So I want to get back to your career, not to get off of this really important topic. You said that you came out of college, you thought you were going to be something. You thought that B2C was going to be your thing. B2B was your thing. You've been in a lot of cool companies and done a lot of cool things. If you could pin down the most pivotal moment where you said, this is going to be my career and this is what I'm going to make a lifetime out of and be passionate about, where do you think that takes you?
Yeah. So I will say that I think there are two answers to that question. The first is the direct answer to that question. I think my first business trip that I took at my first job, I went with a coworker who I was very close with, and I was working in event marketing at the time. We were putting on an oil and gas event in the beautiful city of Columbus, Ohio. And
how exciting!
Oh yeah,
I will tell you, there's a lot of listeners to this podcast from Columbus. So
that's why I said it's beautiful.
Our personal feelings about Columbus aside.
We stayed across the street from the Blue Jackets arena, and ended up going to a game that week. And kind of seeing it, I felt like I went from child to adult on that trip, because the trust that first back then you had to earn the trip. They didn't just send you. So the event had to do well. So I worked my tail off, and the event was very successful, and they sent me off. And then to have the trust to run it, and to run it successfully, and the fate of these attendees in my hand, I think was a big moment for me. But that's the first answer, which is, Zach in his 20s, saying, hey, I could get used to this, doing my travel. I also, at one point in my career, I was managing a team of 5 in North Carolina. So I was flying down to North Carolina to be with them and flying back. And I felt so hoity-toity and look at me, until I got exhausted from all the traveling. So I think that's like one part of it is the actual, moment that I had in my career that I said, I can do this. I can do this forever. But I think now in my older age, quote unquote, I'm 36 now. I have a family. I'm hoping to grow that family. The answer is I don't know if that's going to be forever, right? And what kind of career arcs are in store for me? What kind of different turns can I make? And I find that being my new hustle. My new hustle is looking and seeing, is this forever? Is this the next 30 plus years of my career, doing what I've been doing? Or are there other areas I can take this on, whether it be going out on my own or even just, switching industries completely. And that's kind of something that I'm, working through every single day. So I actually think that after what's now been almost 13 years of a career, I actually think I'm in a pivotal moment in my career now. That doesn't mean I make the decision now. This could be a decision that takes 5 years. But I think the first pivotal moment was proving to myself that I can do this. It was very scary walking into an office for the first time. And, every time I clicked send on an email, I wasn't sure if that was my last email because I was a little entry level kid. And then realizing I can do this and I can be a leader in the office, in the workplace. And then now is, second is kind of looking at the second half of my life. What does that look like? And, working with my wife and working with my family and seeing what the future looks like.
First of all, your wife is awesome. Maybe we should have her on the pod.
She's perfect. Awesome. She's way better for this than I am. That's for sure.
She's much and far more entertaining. But
absolutely,
whatever, because she's not from Boston. She's from New York. See where we're going here. But I think that is. I've done a bunch of interviews for this podcast where we're heavy into year one of this, and that is. I hate saying this because it's you, but I'm going to say it. That's one of the most profound things that has ever been said on this podcast. And that's, I think, mostly because one of the things that's come up over and over again in the conversations that I'm having on this podcast is how do we recognize those moments? How do we recognize when we're at an inflection point?
Yeah.
And then how do we push through that? And a lot of people, and it's almost impossible. That's why I think this is what you just said is awesome, because so many people, by no fault of their own, have no idea when they're in that moment.
Yeah.
It's not like a guy or is on a hiking trip and an avalanche comes and they have to dig themselves out of a cave. Right. Obviously, everyone's like, okay, this is my moment. I'm either going to die or I'm going to live. That's not, right. But it's like the fact that you could have the foresight and the insight to say at this moment, I'm not sure. First of all, I'm not sure, but I do know that, and I hope that we have you back on the podcast in a couple of years. I hope that this podcast, when we're
and I'm a doctor.
Who knows what, by Keep Hustling. Right. When you, by the way, let's make a deal now. If and when you decide to take the MCAT.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll right after that or right before that, we'll do an episode
you got a deal.
What the hustle that got you there. I'm not really so concerned about that.
And then you're going to see my MCAT score and you're going to cancel the episode.
Like, maybe marketing wasn't a bad idea. But I think that the ability to recognize that is so powerful. And it's like, and then the most important part of that hustle is I'm in that moment. What do I do with it?
Right.
And so many people would run scared from that moment. So many people would say, I've been doing the same thing for 12, 13, 14 years. I can't change or I don't want to change. But I think having that insight into this is where I am. Maybe this is it. Maybe this isn't. I don't know. But I'm going to run with it and I'm going to roll with it. And by the way, don't discount the fact that you mentioned that you have a tremendous support system.
Absolutely. And I'll say that, I think, in my younger bachelor days, there was a little bit of fun when it came to work and going out with your coworkers after work. And, and there was that was kind of the fulfillment there. But now where I am in life, it's like a means to an end of, to support my family. And that's what we're trying to figure out right now. What is the best avenue to do that? Is it remaining where I am, remaining in this industry? Is it, what does the future look like? And that's not an overnight decision. It takes hundreds, thousands, maybe conversations, and it's ongoing. That's all I can tell you is it's ongoing.
Isn't it depressing when you go from being the guy who's stoked to go on a business trip and go to the bar after you land in the hotel
to dreading it
to no, I'm the guy at everyone knows insurance conferences. I'm asleep at 9:00.
Yeah.
Everyone else is, we just finished this event. Let's go to the bar in the hotel. Aaron will be sleeping. there's a lot of value in trying to get some sleep. Even though I find that my wife hates when I say this, but that I sleep terribly when I'm away on business.
Okay.
And she's like, "What do you mean? You were in a hotel? I was home with 5 kids, and you were in a
Right.
hotel." Like, but
But there's
yeah,
something about your own bed. There's just something about it.
yeah, but it's also just like it's super depressing when you're like, if I just
Yeah.
landed and I do the thing and then I go out tonight, I will not be able to perform tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I guess that's also part of the hustle. But it just makes me feel old. We're getting old, Zach.
We're getting old. We are getting old. It's crazy.
Yeah, gosh, you're the man. We have a closing tradition on this podcast. First, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing the story. I really hope we get that article. Everyone should really just look up the story. If not, just Google the story of Mark Weiner, Boston. I'm sure you'll find it.
You'll find
if
some
your
stuff.
Browser, if you're in New York and your browser is filtered out of Boston, send Zach a note. He'll PDF you whatever you want.
I'll do what I can. Yeah.
But we have a closing tradition on this podcast where we ask our guests to leave us with their favorite all-time or timely motivational quote, what it means to them, what it means to their hustle, and with that, I'll turn the floor over to you. Thank you again for being here, and thank you for being a true friend and for inspiring me every day.
Yeah, really appreciate you having me on, and really love what you're doing with this. And I was thinking about which quote to use, but now that we've spent some time speaking of my father, I'm gonna use one of his favorite quotes, which you keep bringing up Boston. It's he heard it's not Tom Brady's quote, but he heard Tom Brady say it in a
hold on. I'm sorry.
Conference.
I think your audio is tailing out. 1 second. You're on my podcast. And you're really going with a Tom Brady quote?
It wasn't his quote. I don't know whose quote it was, but he said, "I didn't come this far just to get this far." And I'll go with that.
That is keep hustling. Gosh, I hate that that's so good. Gosh, I hate that that's so good. I hate that you brought that up.
Yeah.
You could have just said you once heard from your father, heard from someone. Gosh, I hate that.
And also to share a second one, the one that my dad also lived by was, if you think you'll lose, you will. And if you think you'll win, you might.
Love that.
Yeah.
That is keep hustling. That is.
So we had that. That was on a T-shirt. We went to like a brain cancer walk, and so we were Team Poppy. On the front, on the back was that quote.
I love that quote.
Yeah.
From the great Mark Weiner.
Yeah.
From his awesome son Zach, who's on this podcast, to his only non-medical relative, so we can talk about keep hustling. Really, Zach, thank you for being here. Thank you for being an awesome friend, and thank you for inspiring my hustle.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for everything.
This has been another episode of Keep Hustling. Remember, do well by doing good, and always keep hustling. All right, hustlers, that brings us to the end of another fantastic episode. Thank you for listening. The listeners are the most important part of this show. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Your feedback means the world to us and helps us reach more listeners. Plus, be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. We have some amazing guests and topics lined up for you, and we don't want you to miss out. And finally, if you have any suggestions, comments, or even just want to say hello, please feel free to reach out to us on all social media platforms. We are Keep Hustling Pod on Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you to continue the conversation. Thanks again for tuning in and supporting our podcast. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Until next time, stay curious, stay hungry, and keep hustling.